mitä unikot seinälle ripustaan. Ja 5-0, noin! Ummilla Tokioon ilman mitään paineita. Naula ranit ilman lisäaineita. Jahta paikkaa, jahta sitä paikkaa.
Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on skateboarding and tactical urbanism. My name is Jani Päivänen, and I'm from Finnish consulting group FCG, and I'll be your host for this unique event. In our human environment team at FCG, we do a lot of co-design with different groups in order to make a city for people, especially to serve outdoors life and the active use of public space in cities. Actually, just yesterday, we were facilitating a walking lab for students in a Finnish city center and ideating improvements with them. So once again, I saw how people come up with great ideas when they are motivated to improve their surroundings. And like one of those students said, we should have illusion art in the center. And I thought that's a good idea for any center. So it reminded me a little of skateboarding, a kind of illusion art in my view. Because I don't know so much about skateboarding. For now, I've been mainly watching and wondering what's happening. So our idea for this event was that we could learn a lot from skateboarding. We think it must be much more actually than meets the eye. It's not just tricks and excited crowds. It could be sort of a story of how the city is transformed by the people doing what they love in public. So why are we doing this? It's not to promote only skateboarding as such, but it's to better understand this city for people. We need activities and initiatives that empower different communities, that liven up our cities and increase public life and also active mobility and add to the sense of belonging. So now we will have this wonderful opportunity to listen to people who really know about this sport and learn about their experience and imagine better ways for people to come together and collectively work to make cities better places. So we'll have a view on how everybody can make a footprint in the city, quite concretely. And we will have 4 wonderful speakers coming up, and I'll present them in just a minute. But first, I want to give a big bunch of thanks to the co-organizer, Chasing the Spot project, and especially Mr. Samuli Hessu Heino from that project. Please, Samuli, share a little what this project is about.
Basically, Chasing the Spot, which this webinar is part of, is actually a project that I'm spearheading, and the aim for the project is to bring Finnish skateboarding to the Olympic arena. But aside from the actual competition side of things, we aim to bring skateboarding visible different ways to the more wider audience than the skateboarders themselves. So basically, this webinar, for example, shows the beautiful culture of skateboarding and how the DIY activism can work hand in hand with the city planning to make our cities and villages more human, I would say. And our aim in Chasing the Spot, like how we keep it open for everyone, is that we don't take, let's say, for this competition side of things, like we don't take the Finnish champion, the second place and third place that who can represent skateboarding. We actually have it as an open team, so everybody can request to join the team and come and show how they want to skateboarding to be shown in the competition field. So we're trying to keep this fun and open for everyone.
Thanks, Samuli. And before we start with the presentations, I still want to thank photographer Keke Leppälä and the video makers Pablo Films, Juri Paajama and company, whose work we will enjoy during the whole show. It's wonderful work you're doing. And the music we heard in the beginning was Pummila Tokioon by the artists Avionin Prinssi and Tono Slona. And next we will hear the 4 keynotes, and they will be in keys C, E, D, and A. So first, I want to present Ian Borden, and Vice Dean of Education at the Bartlett School of Architecture at University College London. And he's the author of over 150 publications on architecture, automobiles, film, photography, and urban theory. And he's a skateboarder with over 40 years experience himself. And he'll play us the keynote of C for culture. Welcome, Ian.
Hi. Welcome to London, or welcome virtually to London. It's a snowy London here today. I doubt it's as snowy as Helsinki, but we've got a bit of snow on the ground. I think some of the kind of key challenges are in thinking about skateboarding and its integration with cities. So what we see on the screen at the moment is a kind of an encapsulation of the full history of skateboarding. As many of you will know, skateboarding is on the left. It starts in swimming pools, or one of the origins is in swimming pool. It's this transgressive action, taking over a domestic space, a domestic swimming pool, drain the water out of it, turn it into something else, turn it into a space of pleasure. That happens in the 70s, in the 80s a bit. And then, as we see in the middle, street skateboarding takes over. And skateboarders realise that actually you don't need strange architectures like swimming pools or big pipes or anything. You can just use rails, steps, ledges, just the normal parts of the city. And that, in a way, is what I think a lot of people think of with skateboarding, is out there in city streets, so you're reusing everyday urban spaces. But with this also, particularly in the 80s and 90s, there's a certain kind of masculinity with it. The idea that this is dangerous, you'll get hurt, you'll get bloody, and maybe it's even semi-illegal, transgressive, even criminal. So that's skateboarding as a sort of trajectory over several decades. But what we've seen in the last 10 years or so is skateboarding, I think, really expand. So again, on the left here, we see skateboarders building their own skate parks, often called DIY, do it yourself. Often very small, not big things. So this is, you see on the left, is a DIY skate park that existed near where I'm sitting in London, just for a few months. As you can see, it's pretty crudely built. It's not very big. Then we've got to see in the middle, one of the amazing kind of senses of creativity and artistry that gets associated with skateboarding, all kinds of film, photography, entrepreneurialism, board design, etc., writing. And then we've also seen on the right is a rise in skateboarding, thinking outside of itself, contributing to society, being a positive agent within society, and particularly being used to empower youth and people who perhaps otherwise wouldn't engage with the city. This is a shot from a refugee camp in the Middle East, where skateboarding is being used to help help connect with a young female skater. And then, of course, the other thing that we've also seen recently is amazing skate parks. This is one I happen to be very peripherally involved with. It's in southeast England. It's called F51, and it's going to be the world's first ever purpose-built indoor multi-storey skate park. And it's a sort of €15 million budget. So this is kind of a fantasy architecture. So the challenge for me is, how do you bring all those things together? How do you get this sort of transgressive street, this, do something independent? How do you have creativity and almost a philanthropic, community-connected nature of skateboarding, and architectural design and good design? How do you bring all these three things together? So just what I wanted to do was just show a few examples, a few suggestions, a few tactics of how might this happen. And the first one is actually heritage. Some skate parks and skate spaces have been around a long time. At the top here, we see the Undercroft in London, which has been skateboarded since the early 1970s. Wasn't made for skateboarding, it was taken over by skateboarders. But this is now as a bit of London which has been designated, zoned, legally designated for skateboarding. So you can make skate spaces, appropriated spaces, into permanent and recognised parts of skate culture and cities generally. At the bottom is one of the surviving skate parks from the 1970s. There aren't many of these left now in the world. This is Rom Skate Park, just to the east of London, built in 1978, and this has now been heritage protected by Heritage England. So it can't be knocked down, it can't be turned over for other uses. But obviously other things you can do is you can build skate parks. So this is another skate park near where I'm sat in London, Crystal Palace. I've been involved in getting this skate park built and run. And it was done by a coalition between local skaters, a skate park design company, Canvas, a landscape designer, KLA, the London Borough of Bromley City authorities, all come together to produce what's really a community space that happens to be a skate park. In a way, it's not a sports facility. It's a place for people to come together, and skateboarding is kind of the glue that brings people together there. Sometimes, it's worth saying, some of these things are just wonderful architecture. The skateboard in Oslo, designed by Dark Architecture, a great modernist or a modern building, really expressing also the architecture of the skateboarding inside as well. So there are things that you can do that are really kind of great architecture as well. Just a couple of other things that you can do that I've been involved in. Sometimes you can just do events. So this was a one-day event. I work at University College London, as Yanni, I think, mentioned. We've got a site over on the old Olympic Park site in East London, and we turn this over for a day for skateboarding. Some of our students built some, designed and built some ramps for Dear Bakar. There's also an engineer designed and built these ramps. And we particularly used it to celebrate adaptive skateboarding. So, either Lily Rice, who you see top right, who's a really proficient WCMX wheelchair rider, or you see in the middle at the top Dan Mancina, who is a skateboarder who is blind, legally blind, and measures his way out onto different ramps as a way of skateboarding. And this was a sort of a celebration of what you can do with public space and just take it over for a day. What we're also now doing at this same UCL campus is we're exploring a way in which we can make the public space around some of our buildings accessible to skaters. So in a way, it's taking that Inner Skate event, which we did with this group Inner Skate from the Smithsonian, but now trying to make it into a permanent part of our estate. And we have a group called City Mills Skate, who are working with local youth and trying to work out what they would like to see by way of obstacles and other skateboardable sculptures and features. And what you see on the screen here is we started off doing some face-to-face workshops. Obviously, we haven't been able to do that recently. So what we've been doing, what City Mills Skate have been doing, is sending out some model kits out to people. They then make a little model of what they would like to skate. send them into City Mill Skate, and City Mill Skate put them up on their Instagram account. So if you go to @CityMillSkate on Insta, you can see some of these things. And in a way, this is about a journey with engaging with local youth as much as the end product. Just two more examples very quickly. Sometimes then this tactic can be taken in more permanent form. So this is the Water Square in Rotterdam. It's just kind of great public space. At times it is meant to flood with water, but at other times it's meant to be skated. So skateboarding here is integrated into public space, into urban design. And then just a final example, really the same thing. I showed you the undercroft earlier. This was a design done for a kind of alternative undercroft by a Danish architect, SNE architect, Soren Enevoldsen, the main designer. And again, this is an idea that you can design a public space that isn't a skate park, but just happens to be great to skate. And in a way, I think this is one of the big challenges now for cities. It's not just how you build skate parks, but how you build these kinds of skatable spaces. I'm sure we're going to hear a few more examples of this from the other speakers. Back to you, Yanni.
Thank you so much, Ian. That's a lot of wisdom in 10 minutes. And what you didn't have time to say, everybody can read from this great book by Ian, Skateboarding and the City. As you can see from the notes, there's a lot to find there. So next up, I'm presenting Kristin Ebeling, the lifelong skateboarder and executive director of Skate Like a Girl, a non-profit organization in Seattle, USA. And now it reaches over 10,000 skaters each year in Seattle and the San Francisco Bay Area. And she's also an experienced youth mentor, skater, and activist, and is dedicated to improving equity in access to skateboarding, inspiring non-traditional skaters globally. So Kristin will play us the note of E for equality. Welcome, Christian.
What's up, everybody? My name is Kristin. My pronouns are she and her. I hail from Seattle, Washington. It's 6 a.m. roughly where I am on the West Coast, and I'm super honored to be here, although I am a little sleepy, to be honest. So hopefully this goes super smooth. Super stoked to be here, share a little bit of my experiences. So for my day job, as Yanni said, I'm the executive director of Skate Like a Girl. We have a mission of creating a more inclusive community and utilizing the vehicle of skateboarding. I also participate in skate media quite a bit as a panelist on a podcast called Vent City, and also co-founded an all women and trans skateboarding magazine called The Skate Witches. Contribute to other like major outlets like Thrasher and things like that. It's a little bit about me. But yeah, I'm a lifelong skater. I've been skating, I started being a wood pusher, if you call it that, just about 20 years ago. I grew up learning mostly at skate parks, but as an adult, I spend most of my time in the urban environment doing what we like to call street skating. And although I thoroughly enjoy the physical act of skateboarding, and I could just talk about purely just how much I love skateboarding, skate tricks, and nerd out about that, I thought it might be a little bit better to shed a light on what skate culture is like for someone that grew up for the last 20 years as a non-traditional skater, and what it's like from my perspective. And by a non-traditional skater, what I mean by that, just quite bluntly, is like I'm not a white cisgender man. Like I said, just I'm a super passionate street skater. But yeah, my true calling in life and my mission with my work and all the side projects that I do is to create a more inclusive skate community. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal critique of kind of some of the key parts of skate culture, key tenets of skate culture, how my community has reimagined and redesigned spaces in skateboarding, knowing that, these tenets are there, and how I believe what we've created on a grassroots level, on a DIY level, is actually a fundamentally better architecture for the future of cultural spaces in skateboarding. So I know I just threw a lot of words at you, and I know there's a lot of potentially non-skaters in the audience, but I assure you I will walk you through this on a 101 level. So let's get into it. So a lot has changed in skateboarding since I started in the year 2001, and it's a super beautiful thing. It's a lot more diverse these days, more welcoming than ever before. Like when I go to the skate park, I'm certainly not the only woman that's present these days. Also, there's meetups and different groups taking up space and redefining what it is to be a skateboarder. But yeah, just for a moment, I wanted to take you back to when times were not as great as they are now. Back when I was a teenager, this is my skate park that I grew up at. So after I first got a skateboard for Christmas in the 6th grade, I started going to this skate park right here in Kirkland, Washington, every day after school. This skate park was particularly bad, even for the time in the early 2000s that I was present there. These ramps had no coping, the ledges were super tall, and I couldn't even ollie onto them. This rail was unfathomably steep over there on the right side of the park. But nevertheless, this is where I became a skateboarder, and this is where I learned everything I know about skateboarding for the most part. So within a matter of a few weeks, I jumped headfirst into skating. So not only going to the skate park, but I watched skate videos, reading every magazine, overhearing conversations from the older men that were more or less the kings of the skate spaces, the parks, the shops, the skate spots. And through that, just kind of diving into the skate culture, I feel like I learned three key tenets, some things that I feel like skateboarding really screams from the top of its cultural lungs. And some of these things my colleague had mentioned a little bit in his previous presentation, but the three that I wanted to talk to today is skate fast and die is a motto in skateboarding. So go hard or go home. The second one is that good skaters are the center of the skateboarding universe. So if you're not good at skateboarding, you matter less. And the third one is that skateboarding is an individual sport. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these. So I wanted to first say that as the executive director of Skate Like a Girl, being a writer, a member of the community, having skated for 20 years, I'm in my 30s, I have the opportunity not only to just write these tenets off, but rather kind of start to flip them on their heads and rewrite what it means to be a skateboarder. And my goal with walking through these is that we can unpack them and share the ways in which I feel like we can start to reimagine cultural spaces, not just from the traditional lens of skateboarding, but from alternative experiences, bodies, identities, experiences, et cetera, et cetera. So folks that don't often sit behind the driver's seat of skateboarding, so to speak. And my main question is, how can we make it so that skate spaces are a space where everyone feels comfortable showing up? So let's figure that out. So the first one I wanted to talk about, this is the slide I was supposed to be showing, but this is the Skate Like a Girl. This is our community. Let's give you a good image. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was the motto of skate fast and die, or go hard or go home. So one key fact is that roughly a third of all skateboarding injuries happen within the first couple of weeks of skateboarding. And at my organization, Skate Like a Girl, we really had to try to find a way to mitigate that risk because, you know, if you can see it from a business perspective, if you were losing a third of all of your participants within a matter of weeks, you have quite a lot of a smaller customer base. So that's why at Skate Like a Girl, we have a motto, and it's basically the opposite of go hard or go home. We tell everyone to skate slow and live, which, yes, in a lot of ways is a super cheeky joke. And we don't actually want you to slow your wheels down. But the main point is that we don't want anyone to feel like they have to prove anything in our spaces. And everyone can go at their own pace. Dying or getting hurt is in no way glorious. And so I feel like we, as a culture at Skate Like a Girl, in our spaces, in our Women in Trans nights, in our camps and things, we've successfully created a culture where where non-aggressive athletes, as well as people that, you know, are super passionate or interested in progression, et cetera, can all come together. With the point that, you know, if we create a space where it doesn't matter how good you are or how hard you go, everyone can actually have fun together. All right. My next one is that in skateboarding as a kid, I learned that good skaters are the center of the skateboarding universe. And just like with Skate Fast and Die, I just really don't think this is sustainable for skateboarding. And I think we need to start to pivot. So in skateboarding, we worship the skater. We look up to the skaters, especially that have the most talent. We often look at people we often look past kind of how people are as human beings, and we really just look at their skills, their style, oftentimes the clothes that they wear, what they represent as a skater. And this transcends into the skate spaces that we build and create. We often, as you can see in this image on the left, build skate parks for this guy. So as you can see, this is quite a large double set, a handrail, what we call a hubba ledge, coming down. And let me tell you, this is something that you would have to be skateboarding probably for at least 5 years straight to be able to even try to start skating that if you're lucky. So in Seattle, which is on the right, this rendering here, you can see this is what's going to be it's actually under construction right now. It's going to be the newest skate park in Seattle. It's about to be completed in the next couple of months. And throughout the design of this process, I had a chance to really redefine with my organization what this skate space looked like. So we basically did the opposite of what skate parks typically do. We built this skate park specifically for the skaters, for lack of a word, the skaters that are not very good. So some of the things that we did in this space, basically we made no feature taller than 12 inches, which is roughly 30 centimeters for folks in the metric system, and with plenty of like ride-on grinds, mellow brinks, and ledges even small as 6 inches or 15 centimeters. So the funny thing about this, though, is that this skate park won't actually only serve beginners. I think all my skaters listening now and folks on the panel here will agree that advanced skaters can also skate small obstacles. They're just going to learn a harder trick on it. So it'll actually create a space where everyone can push themselves and learn. So again, going back to good skaters being the center of the skateboarding universe, I think if we can start to transcend that tenet, we can start to build spaces designed around actually all abilities and not focusing on the pro level or the highest skilled skaters. All right, and the last tenet I wanted to unpack and talk a little bit how we can reimagine is that skateboarding is an individual sport. So this one's gonna land a little weird because in a lot of ways, yes, it is individual. So often skateboarding gets seen specifically as individual, just mainly because there's not really a team or uniforms or a coach. But I'd argue in skateboarding, it's far more like a team sport than you probably would initially think. A lot of the same things that you find in team sports, you're gonna find in skate culture, just in a little different way. So instead of a team, you have what's called a crew. So you have people that you skate with pretty much day in, day out. Instead of a uniform, most people in your crew are going to wear similar clothing or skate a similar type of obstacle or occupy a similar type of spot. And instead of a coach, in skateboarding, we often have a filmer or an older skater in the crew that's always pushing you or telling you, hey, you should try this, or I bet you could do that switch, or let's try that one more time, right? It's the person that keeps you going. So the main point here is that when you say that skateboarding is an individual sport, when we, kind of continue to perpetuate that myth, it's actually not true because you don't really see skaters skating around by themselves. Yeah, sure, maybe commuting or learning a trick here and there, but for the most part, skateboarding is very much a group activity, even though, what we're doing individually is not necessarily specifically linked in terms of a game. And every skater is a part of that community, and that community is super vital for every skater to learn new tricks, to film, to create, and to keep us all going. And so at Skate Like a Girl, we host regular women in trans sessions, which you'll see here in the image on the right. You'll see actually 2 images, just so that we can build our community. We can find people that look like us, people that skate at a similar ability level or have a different or have a similar lived experience, so we can feel safe and comfortable and have kind of our community with us as well. So yeah, I just wanted to close by saying that regardless of whatever mainstream skate culture does, the big name pros, skateboarding contests, big brands, media outlets, all the people that have power in skate culture, regardless of what they do, on the grassroots level, skateboarding is really changing. and it's changing for the better. And the sooner that skateboarding can kind of start to amend the cultural norms that I kind of had unpacked today, the more sustainable and fun and inclusive what we do can be. If skaters can build DIY parks, make urban spots skatable, campaign for skate parks for decades until they're finally built, I am certainly sure that we can be the architects of a new skate culture where everyone can truly show up and all bodies are represented. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks so much, Christine, for these thoughts on the on sharing the experience and of this team sport. Really cool. Next, we have Gustav Edens Svanborg from Malmö, Sweden, our dear neighbor. And Gustav is the unofficial skateboarding coordinator for the city, working for the Malmö project for the Department of Streets, Parks and Property. And maybe you'll say a little more about yourself when starting. So Gustav, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Right, I'm Gustav Svanborg. I work, like I said, for the Streets, Parks and Property Department of the city of Malmö, and I work with skateboarding, mainly with events, but also with other activities. I'm going to go through a little bit about what we have, what we do, and also talk about what benefits working with skateboarding in a city can generate. So here we go. Malmö is kind of known as a skate-friendly city. And of course, we do have skate parks, the biggest one being Stapelbäddsparken. But we also have Seberg Skate Park, we have Oxie Skate Park, and a few more. And they're becoming increasingly full. There's a school that has built a skate park in the schoolyard, and we've worked with another school to create a sort of tennis court that is also skatable in order to introduce skating to a new area that needs social spaces, and also to sort of not just think skateboarding, but to think multifunctional spaces. There is an actual skateboarding high school in Malmö where students from all over Scandinavia move to Malmö and get their academic credentials for university. And they also have skateboarding on the curriculum. And we do work in public space. So by introducing street furniture that functions well for skating, we use that to activate existing urban spaces, like these granite blocks here you see that are designed for skating, but also to sit on. For the events and temporary activations, we have over the years built up a sort of a sculpture park that can add an aesthetic value to spaces, but also provide skate functionality without necessarily looking like a skate park. So we use them for temporary activations. All those spaces, they're great, but the most important thing, the most important spaces for skateboarding in Malmö are these ones. The DIY, the do-it-yourself spaces. Before the skaters had the big skate parks and the support from the city, they didn't have much. And so they took it upon themselves, inspired by skaters from Portland, to build their own. And not only did they build their own spots, they also communicated that story. They created films and articles and so on, telling the story of, if you don't have it, you can build it. You can create your own scene. And that's what has sort of built Malmö's brand. It's not the big skate parks, it's the do-it-yourself activity. But speaking of events then, this is the biggest event we've done, Vans Park Series, the World Championship Final. Vans Park Series came to Malmö 3 years running. And through this event, we were able to construct a new skate park so that we try to always generate long-term benefits through all the events that we do. But we don't just do big events, we do small events too, that are accessible to all levels of users. And we also try to do events in the streets to show that skateboarding has a natural place in the urban environment. Out of all those events, the one that has the highest significance within skateboarding, arguably, is Verdatech. And this is not an event that the city has invested in. This is produced by the skaters for the skaters. And because it's grown organically over the years, it's kind of become an unofficial world championship. But it's more of a global community event. And the fact that that has evolved in Malmö has, for one thing, raised the production level of the local skate scene to produce these big events. But it's also given Malmö a sort of platform as an event producer on the global map. And so the sort of, what I'm trying to say is that the events that are only directed at the community, that are by skaters for skaters, are in fact directly linked to the fact that we get Vans Park Series coming here and creating this great value for the general public. So yeah, you get the point. Right, so how has all this happened? This is not about what spaces you create. Malmö is not about, like, the parks could all be different, you know? The point of the Malmö story is that of the institutions. So the skaters in Malmö got organized and built a strong skate organization. And from that platform, they could work together with the city because the city could trust them to get things right and take responsibility. And so the skaters also kind of had the approach of not asking for stuff. Hey, we deserve a skate park. They took the approach that if we show the city that we can do this thing, then they'll let us do the next thing. And then this, like, step by step over 20 years, Malmö has become a skate destination. So it's about the institutions and the people more than what space you end up building. Right, but now we're talking about skateboarding in public spaces, and like to integrate skateboarding in urban spaces. And first of all, of course, there's problems with this. Different users in different spaces can mean conflict, and Kristen covered this really well. There are problems with skaters. Male dominance, kind of, skateboarding is also expensive. There are plenty of cultural problems. The things that exist in society exist within skateboarding. So there's glorification of alcohol and drugs and so on. But if you have problems with people, you need to work with the people and able to sort of attack those problems. And what we've done is that we've worked really hard to promote non-cis skateboarding and allow separate times at the skate park and also sort of generally promote female skateboarding. And also always in communication to work with showing not just a normal guy doing aggressive stuff, but to highlight women. You got to see it to be it. And also, you know, to provide free opportunities to start to sort of overcome the initial steps of becoming a skater. And so socially, you could see these problems as, in a way, opportunities to engage with the community that you otherwise wouldn't have. So skateboarding does offer a link to those kinds of communities. There's also problems with space when working with skateboarding, obviously. There's noise, there's wear and tear, and there's conflict with other users. But if you think about them, all those problems are problems of design, not intention. So if you want to get rid of the noise, you can use even surfaces and design skate spots away from sensitive ears, away from offices and housing. And you can use durable materials, then the skate activity won't cause the damage because the materials can sustain it. And if you avoid having a good skate spot in a bottleneck where there's a lot of conflict with pedestrians, but rather in an open space where you can sort of have time to negotiate, then those problems can disappear. And it's important to remember that skaters, they're there to skate. They're not there to cause damage. The damage is a byproduct. And if you look at a ledge like this, before that ledge gets worn down to a point where it needs replacement, it would require thousands and thousands of hours of young people being physically active outdoors with access to a social and cultural community. And so the question arises, what's use and what is disruption? which leads to this. And allow me to, this is a sort of a philosophical, I'm entering into sort of architectural theory territory, and it's not really my place, but bear with me for a second. A lot of spaces within cities are designed for the body to do a certain thing. So one activity at a time, one activity per space. So these people are walking, cycling, and driving, but they are also in this space sort of pushed to be walkers, cyclists, and drivers. And that's not all people are. And this here we have a park that is actually quite a positive space, but what activity does this encourage? Well, what skating does is it allows skaters to reinvent space. This guy here, he's an athlete, certainly an athletic move, but he's also reinterpreting this space, choosing what trick to do, which is an artistic process. He's chosen what clothes to wear in order to communicate a certain style to the other skaters. The person taking the photo is producing this image in order to feature into an article or some kind of media. And together they've mingled around the city to try and find these spaces. So skaters know every back alley of every street in the city, unlike any other user group that I know of. So that's what skating does to people. What it also does to the spaces is that it activates space. It provides entertainment in space. And in doing so, makes those spaces more safe. And because, like Kristen talked about, skating is self-organized. You don't need a team. There are no opening hours. You don't need to only do it with people your age. You can just rock up anytime and get access to this kind of social platform and exchange cultural information. So as such, skate spaces provide this amazing social value. So what's the point of all this then? The point is that you can work with spaces like skate parks or adjust squares to be skate friendly, but you also need to work with the people, and the people are the ones that can dictate the success of those spaces. So you can't have one without the other. And you also need to understand that unless you are a skater, you don't speak skateboarding. And the value that skateboarding can bring is because it's its own cultural community. So help the skaters speak skateboarding, and then reap the benefits from that. And skateboarding does not need to be in conflict with other activities. It adds a layer of functionality, like we explained with the sculpture and how to integrate, like skating sort of integrates with the street in a different way. But skateboarding is not the only activity that does this. And I think, people, there are amazing designs of amazing spaces, but I think a lot of cities can be a lot better at designing in different layers of functionality to be integrated into the cities that we design. Not just design something and hope that people rock up, but rather be like, oh, what can we do with this user group to allow them to be part of this space without dominating it? And then last thing, sorry, I'm running over. Don't ever use these. Sorry, this is becoming a school lecture now. But these are skate stoppers. This is essentially someone who's designed a perfect skate spot. But then, it's really hard to do that, to get the surfaces right, to get the materials right, to get the dimensions right. This is a great skate spot. So they've done that and paid a lot of money for this expensive stone, and then said, you're not welcome here. You could have lots of fun here, but you're not part of the city. Unfortunately, this space is not for you. And what that does is it alienates like all the people who have a passion, and it tells them that they're not welcome in society. And it's a sign of incompetence. There's 1,000 ways to make that space non-skatable without having to use those. So sorry, that's just, I always want to put this in lectures because I hate those things. Okay, thanks very much. That's me. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Gustav, for these notes on the design aspect. So that was the keynote of D, really. So last but not least, we will have the keynote of A, for Activism, presented by Mikko Kyrönviita. Mikko is a doctoral researcher in environmental policy at the Tampere University in Finland, and he researches the relations of skateboarding, DIY culture, self-organization and governance in urban development, and also is a skater himself, surprise, surprise. So please share your thoughts, Mikko.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. So first of all, thank you for all the organizers and everyone attending this webinar. As Jani told already, I come from Tampere and work as a researcher in environmental policy at the Tampere University. And topic of my presentation is activists and the self-made city. And I try to illustrate some of the ways how skaters are taking part in urban development, creating new urban spaces and perhaps more livable cities. And this is based on my ongoing doctoral research in which I study the relations of skateboarding, DIY or do-it-yourself skate park building and urban governance. And I focus especially on the ways how skaters organize and what kind of resources and means they use to build DIY skate parks, but also the effect on urban planning and to promote skateboarding. And what kind of partnerships skaters and the city organizations form. And of course, as a researcher of environmental policy, I'm also interested in the questions of agency and what kind of political agency takes place in skateboarding. And I think the cases of Tikkutehdas DIY and Kenneli DIY, to which I focus on in this presentation, connect quite well to those themes. So this is Tikkutehdas DIY in Tampere, which was built roughly between 2010 2013. And the skaters started to build Tikkutehdas DIY partly as a reaction to the city's skate park plan, which was prepared in 2008 but never implemented. But of course, this whole thing was also about having fun with friends and building new stuff to skate. But what is important here is that Tikkutehdas DIY, which was started in the true DIY spirit without any permission, showed, and this is a quotation from one of the skaters, that it is possible to influence society and one's own environment from the bottom up, not only through top-down systems. And Tikkutehdas DIY also, it was a starting point for a non-profit NGO, Pirkanmaan Kaarikoirat, or the Ramp Dogs in English, that has had a major influence in skateboarding in Tampere, but also on many other things, as the case of Hieraranta and Kenneli DIY exemplifies. Just as a background information, Tampere, which has a little more than 241,000 residents, is the third biggest city in Finland and grew last year approximately by 3,000 new residents. Of course, that's quite modest compared to some other cities around the world, but in Finnish context, Tampere is a big city and growing rapidly. So there's also a need for urban infill in brownfield areas like Hieraranta, which the city bought in 2014 from Metsäboard, which is a forest industry company. Anyway, instead of keeping the gates closed, the city of Tampere and the Hieraranta development program took another approach in developing the new city district. And they started to open open the formerly closed industrial area for residents and rent old pulp mill and other factory spaces to NGOs, small companies and organizations at a very low rent to create something new, test ideas and organize events. And that's also how Kennelly DIY started in 2017. And what is really remarkable in Kennelly DIY is that the ramp dogs initiated a Builders Jam, an employment activation project, which employed skaters, rather young skaters, and gave them an opportunity to build, see professionals at work, learn and develop their own skills and knowledge in skatepark building. And I think it's really something special how the ramp dogs saw that Kennelly DIY project could be connected to employment services and how they were able to bring together different resources. All the way from every skater's personal skills to the funding from the Ministry of Education and Culture. And altogether, this project was supported by pretty much all the professional skatepark construction companies in Finland, the Finnish Skateboarding Association, and various companies, of course, in addition to the City of Tampere and Hiilaranta development program. And so now there's an indoor skate park, and many of the skaters who were employed through Builders Jam project have also got a job from skate park construction or skateboarding in general. Project has also received quite a lot of publicity, which is nice, of course. The point from urban planning perspective is that Kennelly DIY or the whole Hiilaranta project is not anymore only about participating people, but more about creating processes of co-creation through which citizens, skaters in this case, invent solutions to urban problems and create new services, new jobs, and in a very concrete way, build the city. And I know, of course, there's been some issues when new practices are being developed, but I think the ramp dogs have really succeeded in creating something for the whole community to enjoy. And these are pretty much the same skaters who started from a DIY project only some years earlier. And now they have been able to connect their actions, competence, and expertise to wider processes of urban development. And not only to development of urban spaces, but also to other processes, such as this skateboarding high school program, which is starting next August. Perhaps Tampere is not yet at the same level as Malmö, but during the last 10 years, skateboarding, which is simultaneously culture, community activity, and sports, has crossed the conventional silos and is now more and more connected to different sectors of the city organization, from urban planning to education. So skateboarding has received institutional support from the city organization, officials and politicians. But it also needs to be acknowledged that none of this would have not been possible without the ramp dogs' proactivity and initiative, the skaters' knowledge, and the ability to communicate the value of skateboarding. And I know it's true that not all the people are capable of promoting their affairs and solving problems and issues. But then again, ramp dogs also have gradually learned the ways to influence. First by building a DIY skate park, and then aligning their actions with the city. And it's also true that DIY actions such as informal skate park building can also be problematic, but I think that it's really important to have urban spaces that allow different activities, experimenting and doing things in an alternative way, since really unexpected things can grow from those places. So that's it. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Well, thank you warmly to all you wonderful keynote speakers. That was great overviews of big themes around skateboarding and the city. Now we'll have a short panel session by the name of Learning from the Skateboard Park. And we think it's really worth digging a little deeper into the ways skaters congregate and do their sport and art in public spaces. So let's dig a little deeper in what happens and what directions skateboarding might show to many other kinds of active placemaking and stuff like this. So first of all, I want to introduce a few more people for the panel. And we are showing their names, I suppose. Yes, Teemu Grönlund from the Finnish Skateboard Association and Pirkanmaan Kaarikoirat, which is a non-profit skateboarding NGO based in Tampere as well. You note the city of Tampere a second time. And with his leadership, the Kaarikoirat NGO has actually turned Tampere into the kind of skate capital in Finland that it is. And then we will have Samuli Heino, project manager for Chasing the Spot, also in the panel. And sorry at this point that Samuli's voice was missing in the intro, but we'll try to amend that shortly in the end. And then we have Carlos Lamuela, urbanist and architect from FCG. Carlos is an urban innovator and researching developer in the human environment team at FCG. So, okay. I'd like to continue a little on Ian's presentation about how skating was created from the margin and has gradually moved to the mainstream. And it's a thing with so many sides. It has the activist side, as we saw, and it has the Olympic kind of sports side, and it's an industry as well with all the sponsors and things. So I'd like to get a few more examples of skating communities, what kinds there are, and who the motors are, and who are the end users, so to say. So how are these communities formed? And I'd perhaps like to ask Teemu first from the Tampere experience. Please, Teemu, would you have some comment on this?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So you wanted to know who are the motors and the end users?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of lost you there, but it's okay. So, for instance, our NGO is producing activities, projects, events, and running the indoor skate park here in Tampere. So we need like self-functioning individuals, endlessly innovating motors that are basically producers that know their community, their skaters, authorities, and ways of making things happen locally. And there's a lot of teamwork and voluntary work to get things moving in the first place. And we need different skills from different people to make it work. Just like Kristen said, like it's more of a group effort that counts in then to get things done. And it also takes us constant lobbying of municipal officials and politicians, since they tend to think like in 1 year or 2 year plans with their budgets. And so it's kind of like ongoing struggle, and our aim has been kind of solidify our position in there so that they would count us in their 10-year, 20-year, 50-year plans. And just like gaining their trust and find our friends in the politicians and in the officials. We need people with construction skills to create our own infrastructure. But then again, after that, we have the infrastructure, we need then the people with social skills to keep it together and kind of deal with those problems that Gustav said there. And the end users are the skaters just want to enjoy skateboarding, or the people finding skateboard culture that we kind of help them to include by making skateboarding more accessible and inclusive, even for people that don't skate. Through skate schools, workshops, events, and of course our indoor skate park that is open daily. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. How about the other speakers? What kind of cultures? I suppose it's hard to say because they are so diverse, and we'll come to the questions of equality maybe a little later more. But one thing about skateboarding in general, maybe I think I'd like to ask you all, is there some common misconception about skateboarding? I mean, it is very many things, but is there something that it absolutely is not, and that might be, you know, a common misunderstanding? Ian, please.
I think Gustav really hit the nail on the head when he showed the slide and said that skateboarders they're not interested in causing damage. They're there to skate, and the damage can be a byproduct if the ledge or the bench isn't well designed for skateboarding. I think maybe skateboarding has slightly misrepresented itself in the sense that it can be aggressive in the sense that it reconceptualizes the city. It takes over the city and changes its meaning and purpose. But I'm not sure that it's quite as, you know, two fingers up at the rest of society as we might think it is. It's not, and very much, particularly in the 1990s, street skateboarding was presented by magazines, by skaters, by academics, including myself, as a kind of countercultural, anti-capitalist activity. And I think it's more complex than that. I think it has a spirit of that in it. But I think what we've seen from everyone today is the sense that skateboarding actually is much richer and much more positive and much more creative in its engagement with the world. So I think one of the misconceptions from outside of skateboarding is that it's sort of antisocial at its core. And I don't think it is. I think it has a rebellious, independent spirit, but I don't think it's antisocial.
Thanks, Ian. Gustav has a comment on this as well.
Yeah, well, I think Ian's right. I think something's happened to skating. I think a big misunderstanding of it is that it's cool. I mean, skateboarding has a lot of its sort of cultural heritage from not being cool. Like being a skater kind of used to be more like being something weird, and the enemies of the skate culture were the jocks and the bullies. And skateboarding was a culture, it was alternative, it was into stuff. Skateboarding was kind of a nerd activity. And I think a lot of skate scenes are different, but when I think about my skate friends, they're not alpha males. They're the guys mainly that do dangerous stuff sometimes, but skateboarding culture has kind of offered them a different world that kind of counteracts those things. So skateboarding, well, perhaps it's more jockey today than it used to be, but I think it's like quite a lot of like people like skaters tend to be quite cool and quite, you know, engaged and politically conscious and so on. And I think that there's a misconception around that, certainly.
Yeah, so I think that is a common image that of skating, that it's like a tough guy's extreme sport, and that could be sort of a common misunderstanding. Teemu has also a comment here.
Yeah, thank you. That was great comments. I think skateboarding is a lot of things, and maybe the misconception of it is to try to make these borders to restrict what skateboarding is and what is not. So at least for me, it's a very personal feeling, and everyone has their own experience about it, what I've seen in our community. Thank you.
Samuli.
Yeah, I kind of want to continue from there. Like, you know, now since the skateboarding is Olympic sport, which I think it's going to be a tough one to put it in some certain parameters, but now we're really trying to do this. So I think more freedom we give to this sport, more it will give to us, so to speak. And it would be, we probably talk about this a little bit going forward, but I have a little dilemma here called Suvilahti DIY in Helsinki, and how does it fit into the normal rules and regulations and parameters of city planning? That's something I'm going to ask a question from everybody. What should be done? How can we help this space to bloomish and not to disappear, because it's now falling into the normal rules and regulations and city planning? But we'll talk about that a little bit further, maybe.
Yeah. Carlos, did you have something about this?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to everybody for a very interesting presentations. To me, they are inspiring in the sense that you can see that change is possible from the ground up. And I wanted to ask especially Christine to tell a little bit more about what she's doing with Skate Like a Girl, especially working with kids, girls, kind of like breaking this dominance of the males over urban space, which I can relate to as, for example, with the cars, right? We have lots of cars in our cities, and it's this idea that an important mister moves in a car along the way, and everybody else, please move away. So please, Christine, tell us a little bit more about what's going on in Seattle with your initiative.
Yeah, I'm super down. Thanks so much. Yeah, so I'll just start by saying that the organization I work for is called Skate Like a Girl. I'm the executive director, for folks that maybe missed the beginning, just to reintroduce myself. So Skate Like a Girl, it sounds like we just skate with girls, but that's not really true. The whole meaning behind Skate Like a Girl is we want to critique gender norms and norms about what different bodies can do, who can skateboard, how they skateboard, things of that nature. So constantly, it's not that we only do stuff with girls and women, we certainly do things for all genders. So I just wanted to make that abundantly clear. But we do stuff with a lot of folks, and I can share a couple program models. So one program that we do is called Women and/or Trans Session. It's for women, trans, non-binary, basically non-cis men exclusively. And what that program provides is a space where if folks are feeling insecure about going to a space, whether it's because it's too aggressive or people don't look like them, et cetera, or they want to make friends, there's a lot of maybe some things folks are trying to avoid, but maybe some spaces where folks are just trying to have that, I would say if you feel comfortable rolling up to the spot and you dap everybody up and you're, hey, what's up? And you feel like you're home when you're at the skate park, that is basically what we're trying to create with our sessions, because we know that your average skate park is not going to be that for people that look like me for the most part. Most of the time when I go to the skate park, somebody asks me, oh, how many stairs can you, or are you sponsored? Or, wow, I can't even do that. Or you're pretty good for a girl. Like I've heard that for years. I still hear that, right? So the fact that I've been skateboarding for 20 years and I'm pretty good at it by this point, and I still get sized up at the skate park and I still get to feel uncomfortable, you know, and a space like the Women in Trans Sessions is still relevant for someone like me, I think says a lot about the work we need to do in our culture. And I wanted to end by just sharing a small little anecdote about our Women in Trans Sessions. So we used to call them Ladies' Night, first of all, and we used to have men be instructors. And let me tell you, as soon as we employed and or brought on volunteers and folks that were women and or trans leading the space, also people of color, people of different body sizes and types, so folks that are not just your average skinny or athletic build, but people of size, Black folks, women, trans people, like I said, it really shifted the demographic of who felt comfortable coming into the space. Because when people come into a space, it's very visual, right? And if they don't get cues that they are allowed to be there, you could be the nicest person in the world, but if they don't see themselves there leading the space, they are much likely to try once and turn around and not come back. So I think it's really about creating leaders, leading the space that are representative of the communities you want to serve. And the last thing is, I said, we used to call it Ladies' Night, and we changed the name to Women and or Trans Session, and the demographics, again, completely shifted. We had so many more trans, non-binary, and queer folks showing up in the space, which was our intention all along. But because our name didn't say that, it didn't really communicate that. So I wanted to share what we've learned a little bit, because we're not perfect. And we're always trying to change and grow to integrate non-traditional skaters. It's definitely a lifelong practice. And my best advice is just listen to the youth. All right, I'm out.
Thanks, Kirsten. That was really good. You could call that like leading diversity by example, really, it sounds like. Okay, I'd like to come to the term of tactical urbanism now. If we think of trying out new things, new innovations or changes on a temporary basis. So what do you think we could learn from skateboarding, looking at all these wonderful experiences, do-it-yourself skate parks and things like this? So what's there to transport to other spheres within the city, for instance? Here, Ian, start, please.
Hi, everyone again. Yeah, it's a really complex question, this, and Gustav in particular, and also Miko and Kristen all gave examples of the different kind of tactics that people can engage with the city. And I really think this is one of the great issues facing skateboarding now. When skateboarding appears in the Olympics later this year, maybe next year, one of the dangers is that people will see it as being something which is confined to the sports arena. And what we know is that it isn't, and actually the sports arena is a very minor part of that. But I think there's another, so there's one thing is about what these spaces of the city can be for skaters. And I think that's a really important part of this tactical urbanism. But I think there's another question in here which is equally important, which is where I think skateboarding raises questions, bigger questions in cities that are just questions that are just about skateboarding. And I think it raises questions of what kind of city, what kinds of public space do we want our public spaces to be? So it was very interesting. I showed a picture of the Undercroft space in London, which is for a while was hugely contested. And the skateboarders were nearly moved out of that space after being there for 30 or 40 years. I won't go into the background of that because that was very complex. But one of the interesting things about it was 150,000 people signed the petition to keep skateboarding there. Members of the general public, not just skateboarders. Now, on one level, they were voting for skateboarding and saying, we like skateboarding. But I think what they were really doing is, apart from that, is they were saying, we don't want this space, this vibrant space, to be turned into another coffee, sushi, restaurant, consumer experience, shopping mall type thing. And I think what the kind of tactics that skateboarding do, and it's not just skateboarding, but skateboarding seems particularly good at it, is they raise the question of who is public space for, what are the functions and uses that can go in it, and how do people become urban citizens within that space. And these are all things that people are looking for in their cities. They don't want to basically just walk down a shopping mall all the time. They want to see a city which is different, which is challenging, which is noisy and quiet, which is colourful and monochrome, which is youthful and old at the same time. And skateboarding, I think, helps complexify the notion of what public space should be. And in a way, it's good because it asks questions and it throws out challenges. So I think that's one of the other functions of skateboarding in public space, is it challenges to ask the question, not always answer it, but just to ask the question, what do we want our cities to be? And people like that in their cities. They don't always want to be purely comforted by them.
Thanks. That's you could say it's a big living question mark, really, then, skateboarding in itself. That's really, really wonderful. I'd like you maybe to Gustav to continue from there and maybe think a little about what's your idea on how short-term tactical urbanism might then produce something that is viable in the long term and can contribute to a sort of constant change or long-term change.
First of all, thanks, Ian. I really agree with your points there. And on I find in skating we find these dualities that create complexity. So you have, as a skater, you find spaces to skate, and you're constant. As a street skater, you're out in the streets trying to find places to skate, and you know how hard it is for the spot to be just right, for the surfaces, dimensions, sizes, everything to work. But you also want to find it in a way. So a skate park, everything is given to you, it's perfect. You don't have the choice, you can't interpret. That gets taken away from you. So you know how hard it is to build a skate spot, but you also want skate functionality to be built into the city. And we get so frustrated where there's these bland nothing spaces, where someone created a space for nothing. But of course, those spaces are intended to be open to interpretation and for sort of pedestrians to hang out and people to picnic and so on. But we get frustrated. It's like, why didn't you think of us? Why didn't you make this bench a little bit better? Why didn't someone design in functionality? And what I think what skateboarding does is that it sort of shows that for something to work, you need to really make it work. And you need to actually have the end user group and design for them. But that does not have to mean that it needs to be an outdoor gym. It doesn't have to be, in order to do chin-ups, you don't need an outdoor gym in a certain zone. You can have an artwork with a rail functionality. And so I think skateboarding shows the specificity of the design requirements, but also that doesn't need to dictate the character of the space. And I think this is something that we're learning more in designs of public space, is that the integration of different layers of functionality, like I keep saying, is something that opens up for artists and architects to collaborate with these kind of end user groups to create these innovative spaces where human beings are invited to be creative and sort of enact their evolutionary role of interpreting and discovery and being creative and so on. And I think that's a design challenge for urban space. That perhaps wasn't your question, though. But that's something I wanted to talk about.
That was a perfect answer anyway. I'd like to raise the final keynote once again about the activism and the activity, because that's where it all comes down to, or returns to the active people. So I think from your experiences, what do you think are the main things that an activist group should be thinking about or arguing for when they are, trying to develop some place. They have an idea how to develop it. They may have the tools, they may have the material, stuff like this. So what's the argument for using a public space in this instance for, in order to have the permits or whatever, unofficial permit to do things, temporary or permanent? Samuli or anybody?
As you said my name, I'm just gonna continue your question actually.
Yeah.
I mentioned about the Suvilahti do-it-yourself park. That's already existing in the smack in the middle of Helsinki. It's proved to be working. It's working extremely well for all genders. And now, as it is really working, it's in a situation where city is planning to build those sort of empty spaces instead of this. And I think I'm not too much involved with it in daily, everyday things, but I have a feeling that these guys are a little bit who are protecting this space are a little bit stuck. So again, back to your question, Jani, like what are the key things that you should think about? How to preserve this place? How to fight for this place? How to maintain this area?
Yeah, Kristin has a comment on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to take it just a little bit from some personal experience. There was a skate park nearby where I grew up at. That was really fun that we would go skate all the time. And the city actually ended up ripping out the skate park because young people left garbage at the skate park too many times. And so they removed the park. And I just wanted to say that I feel like one of the strongest arguments is that think of like any other common activity, like let's say driving, right? Like in America, like where I live in Seattle, everyone drives, right? And everyone accepts that there are some negative byproducts of driving, right? There's pollution in the sky, right? But at the end of the day, people got to get to work. People got to live their lives, right? So we accept it, right? And there's also some really bad drivers. There's people that drive drunk. There's people that, do all kinds of ridiculous things in a car, don't put their blinker on, get in accidents, right? But we don't look at driving all over as negative. We don't look at only the negatives of what something does and we don't make decisions off of the negatives, right? So we look at driving as like, oh, well, it's just necessary. Like people need to do it, or it's fun, or people want to go on road trips, whatever. Like we accept it. So what's frustrating about skateboarding, particularly when it comes to the context of like urban planning, designing spaces, should this get knobbed or not, or whatever, like people immediately go to their worst stereotype of what a skateboarder is, what the damage is, that we're destructive. All of us are, whatever you want to say, fill in the blank, covered in tattoos, drinking a beer, smoking a cigarette, dealing drugs, doing graffiti, right? We're like bringing in all these other things. But if we can start to look at skateboarding more holistically and see the benefits and the ways that it's saved people's lives. It's active, it's transportation, it's, doesn't pollute the environment, all these things, right? There's so much positives in it. And so if we start to look at it from a holistic perspective, I think we'll make better decisions about how skateboarding fits into the urban space and in our cities.
Thanks. And I think besides that, then you need more and better communication and probably facilitation also between these parties in order to get results in this. Okay, I'd like to close this panel session with these. I know that there are still comments coming up, and I'd like to thank all the panelists for all these wonderful experiences, how you've been able to condense so much of that into such a shorter time. And I think we'll be left thinking about these things. You can contact, of course, any of us in this panel or at FCG if you're interested to think these relations further. And we'll see what the next big thing is in physical space and outdoors life in cities. And now we'll see a short video of the Chasing the Spot project at the end. Very big thanks to everybody in the panel and for the wonderful keynotes. Thank you all.